So most people would probably agree that trust is a key element to successful relationships and teams. So let's explore a bit, what does trust really mean, or what could it mean? When I studied originally, several years back now, to become a teacher, I came into contact with a child psychologist named Erik Erikson. His view on trust was that it was the faith in that the good will return. And he said this is the reason for the baby's peekaboo games with its mother. So the peekaboo game, you probably played at some stage in your life. If you haven't, here's a quick overview. Mommy disappears, peekaboo, mommy comes back. So the child in this case will experience that the good, in this case the mother, disappears. And then she reappears, she returns, the good returns. So the peekaboo game in his view was practicing trust, faith in that the good will return. So again, we could view trust in the workplace as how strong is your and your co-workers' faith in that the good will return in those challenging times when it feels like the good has disappeared, maybe in times of heavy conflict or downsizing or whatever it might be, or a rough work climate for some other reason. So how strong is that faith in that the good will return? Another view or definition of trust I picked up from watching TV, the Oprah Winfrey Show, if you're familiar with Oprah Winfrey. She had a guest on there. He was a regular guest, Dr. Phil McGraw, I believe was his full name. He later got his own show. He, when asked about trust, said something along the lines of that trust, it has nothing to do with the other person directly. Trust instead, because I tended to view trust then as something that was about how much I could trust the other person. His view was more about looking at yourself and saying, trust is about the extent to which I think I will be able to handle things that might occur in the relationship with the other person. So it was more about my own ability to be able to handle whatever could occur, good or bad things in the relationship. If I thought to a large degree that I would be able to handle anything that occurred, then my trust would be strong related to the other person. If it was lower, then my trust would also be lower. So he sort of more pulled the concept of trust more back to yourself. Whatever way you choose to define and look at trust, I think an important aspect of trust is also looking at the balance between trust and control. If we have a low level of trust, I believe we have a big need for control. Because if the trust is low, we tend to need to control things more. If we have a high level of trust, then we can let go of control. So there's an interplay between trust and control. Also, Will Schutz, when he talked about the different preferences and how groups and relationships mature, and especially when people made a model with stages based on his work, then it could be said that the more trust there is in the group, the more mature the relationships are. The more fear there is in the group, the less mature and less effective the group is. So trust and control, trust and fear clearly have an interplay here that is worth noting when you consider the concept of trust. In conclusion about trust, I have found that trust starts with a leap of faith. Either you take that leap of faith, or the other person or the other persons take that leap of faith to initiate a deeper level of trust. Two very common words that will show up in pretty much any book about groups, about leadership, teams, and so forth are the words trust and openness. So I'm sure you've had some experience in life where you felt that when you trust a person, it's easier to be open with them. So if you trust someone, it's easier to be open and share about yourself and be personal with that person. Perhaps you've also had the experience that another person opens up and shares something about themselves, and that increases your trust in them. So if you've had these two experiences, the question is, in this circular movement that we get, where does it begin? I would say that trust in many ways is a feeling. It's a feeling that you cannot decide. I can't really decide that now I'm going to feel 100% trust towards you, and I can't command you to feel 90% trust towards me. So I believe that the thing that we can influence here is how open we choose to be. So what we can do is, with a little bit of openness, we can influence the trust. So increase the trust by opening up a bit. When there's more trust, then we can be more open, and then we can get this spiral movement where we sort of deepen our relationships. On the other hand, the other thing might occur also, that we get a little bit apprehensive or scared, and we become a little bit less open for some reason in the relationship or in the team. And then other people start thinking, oh, what happened now? And the trust lessens. So then we get a spiral the other way, because they become more closed, less open then. So we get more shallow relationships. So this can spiral either way. Now, what tends to happen sometimes is that we give teams challenging tasks. Let's say we give them a task that requires a maturity in the relationships and in the efficiency in the group that is down here. It requires this trust openness spiral to have done its work, so the group is, and the relationships in the group are well matured and efficient. But we haven't really taken the time or given the team the time to work, team build, to work on the relationships, so their actual level is up here. Then we could illustrate the difference, the distance here between the level the task requires and the maturity of the group as the anxiety gap that is created and the stress within the team. So again, spending time working on this, getting this spiral going of trust and openness, can create more efficient teams and lessen the level of anxiety when teams are given a high performance task that requires them to perform at a high level. But if the relationships are not there, it's going to create that anxiety and stress and waste a lot of the energy. And again, energy is one of your most important resources as a manager to work with. Small talk is a vital part of a manager's toolbox. It does two things mainly. One, it shows that you care and builds trust. Number two, it makes you a part of the whole decision-making process. By small talking, you can show that you care, you can build that trust. Someone said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Small talking is taking just a few minutes a day or a week. If taking 2 or 3 minutes every day with each coworker is too tough of a task for you or too much of a challenge, do it every week. Stop at their desk, at their workstation, and check in. How are you doing? Small talk means that stuff that is not directly related to the result of the project you're working on or the work at hand. It might be, how's your favorite sports team doing? How's the dog doing? What about work here? And sharing something about yourself too, opening up a bit so the other person learns about you, but make sure it's most about the other person, that small talk interaction with each of your coworkers. There was a study made in the Scandinavian countries where they showed that a lot of the team spirit, the work environment, the work climate happens in the break room, where people sit and small talk outside of their workplaces or the workstation, sort of where they have that small talk chit chat. Then in some workplaces, due to budget restrictions, they cut the break room out of the organization and made that into office space instead. And they saw a sharp decline in the climate at the workplace. So then people hovered around the coffee machine instead, and they had their small talk there. Then some organizations, they decided to cut down on coffee too, and the work climate got even worse, because those places for small talk disappeared. Small talk is also where the informal decision making happens. You might be saying one thing in the meeting and thinking, this is how we're going to do it. But then that decision-making process continues outside the meeting room when people small talk afterwards, and someone who is the informal leader of the group might say, "Oh, hey, I'm not going to do it that way, I'm going to do it this way instead." And then the other people in the workplace, they sort of agree with that or go along with that, and then whatever you said in the meeting room does not have that weight anymore. So you as a manager are either participating in the small talk or you're out of it. And if you're going to be part of the whole decision-making process, make sure you're in the small talk, and you will not get invited. You need to invite yourself by doing this small talk, working. It's a continuous process, a little bit at a time, just like a car needs regular maintenance. It's not about doing it once or twice a year. You do it regularly, every day or every week. You build on being a part of the small talk, so when those informal decisions are made in the small talk, you are a part of that. For some people, small talk comes really easily because it's just part of who they are. For other people like me, I have to make a little bit more of a conscious effort to remember to do it, because I can easily get focused on other important things but miss out on that small talk relationship building. So I have to create a structure, so I stop at my coworker's desk or off the workplace and have that small talk that might not come naturally to me, but I can truly see the advantage in building the trust, showing that I care, and being part of the whole decision-making process. When it comes to openness and trust, one of the most common questions I get asked by leaders around the world is, how open should I be with my coworkers, especially in the role of the manager? How open should I be? If we say that a certain level of openness creates that trust which allows us to be more effective together, but how do I know? How open should I be? I then like to say that I think there's a great value in being personal with your coworkers. That will allow them to relax, be more efficient, have more trust in you and in each other. You'll be a good role model for creating that trust. But you do not need to be private. So there's a border between being personal and being private. And where you draw that line, again, you're not going to look up page 256 in any book and find the answer to your question, where does that line go for you. But look at what could be personal stuff you could share, like about yourself. Could be, for example, hobbies, maybe your family situations, and so forth. That could be personal stuff that could allow your coworkers to know you more as a human being and increase their trust in you. On the other hand, in the private section, you might not share the details or even parts of your sex life, for example, or for some people, political views end up in what they vote for end up in the private part. For others, it ends up in the personal. But I would say, think a moment about what can you put in the personal part of things to increase that trust, but also be aware of where is your line? Where do you draw the line to that private part? Because I think too much openness is not always beneficial either. So become clear. Personal, private, and draw the line for you so that you can increase the trust by sharing the personal stuff, but keeping the private, so to speak, private.